Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Pokémon Film Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing the 14th and 15th animated films to be released as part of the Pokémon franchise, Pokémon Black, Victini and Reshiram, and Pokémon White, Victini and Zekrom. But wait, I hear someone say, Sam, you magnificent bastard, why the hell are you looking at two movies instead of one like normal? Well, one thing, you obviously have good taste, and two, that's because these are the same movie. Yeah, when it comes down to it, both of these films are the exact same movie. I mean, okay, let me rephrase that. They are the same movie in the sense that they are the same plot, the same characters, the same story, same everything else, but depending on which version of the movie you watch, depends on what happens at certain points in the movie. Ultimately, again, when it comes down to it, regardless of which of these two films you watch, you're going to be seeing the same story no matter what. But depending on which version you watch, there are things that are unique to each version. Of course, ultimately, things do all coincide by the end, but again, it's just basically a matter of whichever you prefer. With that said, are these films still worth watching? Are they something that I would recommend? Well, let's take a look at them and find out. And of course, that brings us, if we're going to be doing a vlog, we gotta do our long-ass plot summary. So, here we go. So basically, like I said, these two are the first films in the black and white era of the anime, and as a result, Ash's crew has once more changed up. Brock and Dawn have gone off to parts unknown, and in their place are two new trainers. One is a girl named Iris, who's trained to become a dragon-type trainer, and the other is a gym leader named Silent, who was a trainer of the very first gym that you actually visit in the Unova region, and he's traveling with Ash because he wishes to kind of study Ash's own training techniques and learn from it. He's also a chef and likes to frequently introduce basically chef terminology in the form of wordplay and puns, which is enough for me to actually hate this guy. Yeah, I'm just going to say right now, I don't like Silent because of this. I'm not going to say he's a bad character by any means. No, he's actually a pretty nice guy. It's just that I have an unnatural hatred towards him for use of puns, so yeah, I just don't like him. But anyway, what's going on is that the trio is making their way to a town called Einhoek. Sorry, I mispronounced that. They only said it like once in both movies, so I don't really have a lot of time to actually figure out what the proper pronunciation is. But basically, the reason why they're going to this town is because a harvest festival is going on, and as part of the harvest festival, there's a Pokémon tournament going on, so of course, the trio want to enter the tournament. However, as they're making their way into the town, they end up getting sidetracked as a pair of deerling end up falling off the side of a cliff, and Ash, of course, wants to go and help them. As such, he does manage to stop them from falling off, but unfortunately, the cliff they're on is a little too narrow and too steep, and so even though Ash has gotten the deerling, he's about to fall off as well. However, before he can end up taking a dive, something grabs at him and seems to imbue him with some strange energy, and as such, while he does fall off, the instant he manages to get some footing, he makes a leap, and actually manages to jump right off the cliff across a chasm right onto a nearby platform. As such, Pikachu, and the deerling are fine, but now his group's on one side and he's on the other side and so as such, Iris calls out to Ash and asks how the hell he's going to catch up with them. Thankfully, the platform is connected to a cave system, and Ash says that he'll go through there and meet back up with Iris and Silent wherever they can. As such, Iris and Silent kind of go off on their own path, while Ash, Pikachu, and the two deerling end up going into the cave system. However, as they go into the cave system, they find that it's a bit of a maze, but Ash suddenly finds the exact way to get out, as he seems to get a vision of the right path. And as such, this vision ends up taking him to a much larger part of the cave system, which seems to be full of all these diamond-like pathways and structures that dart across the walls. And as Ash walks through them, something in this system begins reacting. Again, it's different depending on the version, but it's a stone. It's basically this big round stone that's at the bottom of the cavern. And again, depending on the version, the stone seems to be emanating a strange blue light or a strange red light. Regardless, Ash has another vision which shows him the exact way out. And sure enough, as Ash takes Ash and Pikachu take the Deerling out, they end up finding themselves going through a secret passageway into a storeroom of a castle. And as such, Ash is able to look outside, and sure enough, he sees Iris and Silent and urges them to come follow him inside. As such, the pair end up meeting Ash inside the castle, and they send the Deerling on their way into safer grounds. But they end up getting a little bit lost as they make their way through the castle and realize that the tournament's about to begin, and they need to hurry if they want to register. Thankfully, they don't get lost for too long as someone comes around the castle and offers to show them the way out. A man by the name of Damon, who claims that he's been restoring the castle for some time and thus knows how to help the group get out. However, as the group was traveling through the castle, Ash encountered something. For you see, Ash was feeling a bit hungry, and so Silent wound up showing Ash his own special blend of macarons. And so Ash, of course, happily eats them, but something seems to be ends up taking many macarons from Ash and eating them itself, which Ash doesn't see what it is because it's invisible. But it does get his attention. Regardless, Ash, Silent, and Iris do manage to make their way into the town, and sure enough, they do manage to register in time for the Pokémon tournament. And the tournament is a little bit randomized, so to speak. Basically, the tournament is full of various competitors, and all of them are wearing a necklace. And what has to happen is that the trainers all have to find each other and challenge each other to a battle. And for the duration of the battle, the trainer can only use one Pokémon, no substitutions. And whoever loses the battle has to give up their necklace. And whichever trainer by the end of the tournament still has their necklace is declared the winner. As such, Ash, Iris, and Silent end up calling out the Pokemon they wish to use. Although Ash calls out his, I forgot what it was. I don't remember. Remember, I didn't watch Black and White very much, but it was a lizard-like Pokemon that looked like he was wearing a pair of trousers that I had to keep pulling up. I know its name, but it's just escaping me at the time. And he asked it to basically watch. You know what? Hold on one second. Scraggy. It was called Scraggy. Sorry, that was annoying me. But yeah, he has his Scraggy watch, and from there we actually do get an opening montage as we see Ash, Iris, and Silent as they go through the tournament, which also leads to this film's remix of the Pokemon Black and White theme, which I think is a good remix. However, while Ash wins his initial fight, Silent and Iris end up losing theirs, mostly because Iris's choice for a Pokemon wound up running, and then she accidentally caused a substitution as another of her Pokemon came out without her consent. Either way, they end up losing while Ash is still in the game. However, his battle doesn't really go very well as he has one of his Pokemon, Tepig, who was the fire starter for the Black and White games, going up against a much stronger water-type Pokemon, and Tepig basically gets his ass whooped and even gets knocked into a stand that's basically selling all this merch surrounding this Pokemon called Victini. However, as Tepig is getting its bearings while landing in the merch cart, we actually see the real Victini appear, and it seems to imbue Tepig with energy, and yes, Victini was the same Pokemon that imbued Ash with energy earlier. And sure enough, once Tepig is charged with his energy, he basically gets a second wind and rushes back into battle, and then when Ash has Tepig use Ember for his battle, it's not really much of an ember, but more of a firestorm as it basically engulfs the other side of the, I guess you could say, arena, which is really just a street, and completely and basically knocks out the other Pokemon with little to no effort, which surprises one of the trainers in the tournament, whose name is, and apologies, gotta check this right now. Her name is Carlita, and she basically begins suspecting about Victini's involvement, which she further tests as she ends up ambushing Ash while he's taking a break and challenges him to a Pokemon battle. And she is a much stronger Dragon-type Pokemon, and so Ash ends up having Scraggy fight in his place, or rather Scraggy volunteers himself. And as such, it's clear that this battle is not evenly matched. Scraggy is a little Pokemon, her Dragon's a bigger one. And as such, while Scraggy tries to use the tried and true headbutt, he probably learned it from Ash, Scraggy ends up getting knocked into some trees and lands in some bushes. However, this is exactly what Carlita wants, as she basically looks into the bushes and watches Scraggy as he's on the ground, and sure enough, Victini appears and imbues Scraggy with the same energy it gave Ash and Tepig. And sure enough, this gives Scraggy a second wind, and thus when he uses Headbutt again, it ends up sending her Pokemon flying, and she ends up losing and gets put out of the tournament, which she doesn't object to. But once the referee for the tournament leaves to go obviously look over any other Pokemon battles, immediately Carlita goes up to Ash, and Honestly, what I do find interesting is that, what I like actually, is that at first her tone is a little bit cold, because when she goes to the Ash, she said, that was Victini just now, wasn't it? Which makes sense, because thanks to Victini's aid, Ash was essentially cheating in the battle, but Ash and Ko's clueless reactions do clue Carlita in that basically they had no idea Victini was even there. And as such, once she lets them know about Victini's involvement, Ash ends up calling out to Victini and basically wants to thank Victini for helping him. However, Victini is not showing itself, as it has the power of invisibility, hence why Ash and Co didn't see it earlier when it was stealing Ash's macarons. However, Ash is able to lure it out as they end up tossing Victini some macarons, which it gobbles up because it loves these things, until eventually Victini does get close enough to Ash for it to feel safe to show itself. Although it's clear that while Victini may be kind and helpful, it's not a people person, as when Ash tries pulling Victini in for a hug and basically starts spinning and twirling all around the playground that they're on, Victini ends up breaking down crying because it's feeling overstimulated, which Ash does apologize for, but from there, Victini and Ash do start kind of hitting it off, as Victini starts hanging out with Ash and Co, and just kind of having fun, just seeing the sights of the town. We don't even see any more Pokemon battles, which makes me think at some point Ash bows out, which I think would make sense considering he was technically cheating. However, the fun times seem to end as the group ends up running to the outskirts of the town, and the thing is that the outskirts of the town are these large stone pillars which kind of stretch into the sky. And whenever Victini gets close to them, it seems a little uneasy. And while Ash tries to get Victini back into the spirit of things as it pulls it along, we soon see why it's afraid of the pillars, because you see at the edge of the town and connected to these pillars is an invisible barrier. And while Ash and Co can walk through the barrier no problem, Victini can't, as it basically just bangs into the side, and to further show how stuck Victini is, it ends up launching a large fire attack right at the force field, and the force field reacts. As such, Ash realizes as a little surprised what happened, but Victini's not doing so well. Either out of shame for what happened, or maybe it's not feeling safe anymore with Ash, Victini ends up running away, which causes the entire group to feel sad. As such, they try to locate Victini, but they don't really get any luck. And as such, they end up finding Carlita's mother, who was actually in charge of that Victini stand that we saw earlier. Her name is Juanita, and they tell Juanita that they saw Victini, which I don't think she fully believes yet, but she does at least humor the group as they ask Juanita if there is any place that Victini would go where it would feel safe. And Juanita suggests that maybe Victini went to this garden that's around the town. And as such, the group ends up following Juanita to where this garden is, and sure enough, along the way, they end up running into both Damon and the mayor of the town. They give him his name, and I'm just going to call him the mayor here. They call him mayor here, and it turns out that the mayor and Damon actually know each other, as apparently Damon likes to go traveling and seeing the world, but he does end up doing some projects with the mayor from time to time, with one of the projects being, fixing up that castle that Ash was in earlier. As such, they pretty much take the pair and go along with that. The group pretty much adopts the pair into the group as they go along looking for Victini. And sure enough, once they arrive at the garden, the local Pokemon in the area do bring Ash and Co to where Victini is. And while at first Victini still doesn't really want to see anyone, as it opts to be invisible and run away, as Ash basically calls out to it and apologizes for not knowing about the barrier, well, he ends up losing his footing and almost falls into a pond. And at this point, Victini finally kind of gets over its shyness and fear and tries to stop Ash from falling, but it ends in failure as he falls in head first and almost freezes. But it turns out this was slightly a ploy, as Ash basically starts splashing water in Victini's face to try and be more friendly. And sure enough, this does raise Victini's spirits a bit as it starts splashing back. It's adorable and I love it. However, as Damon sees Victini, he doesn't look happy like everyone else. Instead, he looks solemn and mentions how Victini is going to help him with whatever he wants to do. As such, it's here we get a bit of lore, as the mayor and Damon take everybody back to, I guess, the mayor's house, and they end up telling a story about the town, or at the very least, the castle. You see, it turns out that Juanita and the mayor are descendants of a group of people called the People of the... hold on one second. They're the descendants of a group of people called the People of the Vale. I don't know why I was blanking on that word. But the thing is, once upon a time, there used to be a prosperous kingdom called, well, the Kingdom of the Vale. And it was located in a valley that's just a few miles away. A ridge that once upon a time was prosperous and full of life. And the reason why it was prosperous and full of life was because the land was enriched with a special energy that flows through the earth called the Dragon Force energy. And basically, at the time, the people and Pokemon of the land worked in harmony to harness the Dragon Force energy and just make the land of basically an Eden. However, things started kind of going downhill when the king of this land kind of had it, well, okay, it's not the king's fault, but rather his kids. You see, he had two twin sons, and while the people of the kingdom loved the sons, his two sons, they kind of operate on two different sides of the spectrum. As one son believed in the strength of ideals, and the other son believed in the strength of truth. And while neither of these forces are inherently evil, they put more stock in them than other people, to the point where their chosen Pokemon, which in this case were two legendary dragon Pokemon, end up sharing their ideals, with one prince, the Prince of Ideals, adopting the legendary dragon Pokemon Zekrom, and the other twin, the other twin, the Prince of Truth, adopted the legendary dragon Pokemon Reshiram. And unfortunately, their clash of ideals led to a war, as at one point the kingdom began to crumble, and basically it was every man for himself. As, like I said, since both princes were so loved, when the two princes clashed, it resulted in the kingdom being divided and a literal war breaking out. And as a result, both princes' Pokemon wound up fighting on their behalf. Unfortunately, though, this fighting did not end well, as Reshiram and Zekrom wound up injuring each other so greatly that they basically spent up all their life force just to be able to heal the wounds. And as a result, both Pokemon were transformed into these large stones, and were basically put into a deep sleep. And as such, while the princes were able to hold on to their Pokemon, it was their Pokemon falling that made the princes realize that maybe this fighting isn't worth it. Unfortunately, though, by that point, it was too little too late, as all the fighting wound up corrupting the Dragon Force, and where once there was prosperity, now was just death, as the Dragon Force was literally sucking the life out of the land. As such, the King of the Vale basically realized that if he wanted to save everybody, a sacrifice had to be made. And as such, the king wound up going to his right-hand Pokemon and asked it to lend him his energy in order to fix everything. And sure enough, his right-hand Pokemon was Victini itself. And what they did was that he created some kind of, I guess, pseudo-mystical, pseudo-scientific contraption that Victini was basically hooked up into. And what this thing did is that it channeled Victini's energies into the castle. And the castle itself was actually gained the nickname of the Sword of the Vale because, well, it looks like a giant sword, with the hilt of the blade being the main castle itself, and basically the handle being these I guess structures that spread up into the sky, and a large rock acting as the blade. But basically the king used the mechanics and the mechanical thing he created, and he was able to he created the pillars of protection, the very things that are scattered around the town in the present day. And sure enough, using the pillars, he was able to create a barrier around the castle and quite literally lifted it out of the Vale over to a nearby mountain, where he was able to put it in place and managed to calm down the Dragon Force. Unfortunately, though, the king put too much energy into the machine, as once everything was said and done, he collapsed, and unfortunately, right in front of Victini's eyes, he died. And I'll give credit where it's due, it's actually pretty sad from Victini's perspective, because Victini basically saw the king as its best friend. And the last thing the king did was that he reached out to Victini and held its cheek before his hand went limp and fell to his side. And the thing is, when he died, Victini didn't fully register it, as at first it thought that he was like sleeping or just exhausted or whatever. But no, he died, and it's clear that Victini doesn't fully understand it, and it's actually really damn sad. And unfortunately, though, the bad news doesn't really end there, because you see, going back to the barrier the king created to lift up the castle, well, he wasn't able to dispel it before he perished, and as a result, when the pillars wound up falling to the earth, the barrier was still up. It was expanded now so that Victini had more space to roam, but Victini was still tied to the barrier. It was still up, meaning that Victini couldn't go anywhere beyond the barrier. So Victini was basically stranded, and according to legend, Victini has been stranded but with the castle for over 1,000 years, which the group is actually shocked and horrified to learn, because that means that Victini's basically been all by himself for those 1,000 years. And while at first it doesn't really seem to bother Victini, as we see the Victini just, playing with all the local Pokemon there, and at one point even goes back out into the garden and gets Ash and Co. and all the Pokemon this fruit that from the berry tree. Well, that night, as everyone is sleeping, Ash really does get a true sense of Victini's pain. As going back to how the vision that Ash had while he was traveling through the caves, it's revealed that that was Victini's work as well. As Victini clearly does have some kind of psychic power that allows it to connect with other people. Most likely, that's how Victini is able to share power with people, make them stronger. Well, through this connection, Ash ends up seeing Victini's dream, and it's a tragic one, as Victini dreams of just being alone in the castle for thousands of years. And it's really sad, because in the dream, Victini's just sitting on the top of the castle, and the days just basically go by and by and by. Civilization grows, the town builds around the castle. And yet Victini's just there, stuck, unmoving. And it's clear through the dream that Victini still misses the king, because in the dream, the image of the king appears to Victini. While Victini's more than happy to see the king just tells Victini that he's sorry, that he didn't mean for it to be trapped like this. And when Victini reaches out to its former master, he just fades away, and Victini starts crying. And I'm not gonna lie, I almost teared up the second time I saw this scene, just because it's so sad. And when Ash sees this and wakes up, he sees that even IRL, Victini is crying. It's really sad, and it makes Ash feel sorry for the little Pokemon. However, when Victini ends up waking up from this nightmare, it kind of flies away, and Ash follows it. And Ash learns as it watches the cliff, as it watches out to the sunrise, that despite everything, there is one thing that Victini truly wants above all else. It wants to see the ocean, as the place where the Castle of the Vale landed is close enough to an ocean, but just not quite there yet. And as such, Ash realizes what Victini wants and promises Victini that he will help it reach the ocean, which makes Victini more than overjoyed. However, going back to Damon, he does kind of explain. While Ash and Co are playing with Victini, he takes his mother, his sister, and he takes his mother and his sister aside. Which, yeah, that's something I forgot to mention. Damon is actually Juanita's son, so yeah, that's a thing. But basically, he takes his mother and his sister and the mayor aside, and he begins explaining what he meant earlier when he said that Victini would be helping him achieve his goal. You see, the thing is, Damon was told the stories of the Vale for a long time. Now, hold on one second, I gotta confirm again. Sorry, I just want to make sure. But yeah, he'd been told stories of the Kingdom of the Vale ever since he was a kid, as Juanita would usually bring him to the valley where the Vale was, and while once upon a time was prosperous, it's just basically dead now. And Juanita did talk to her son about how someday she wished that the Vale would be restored to what it was. And, well, Damon took those statements to heart, to the point where when he's an adult now and trying to, help restore the castle, he basically went to the mayor of the town, and he basically said he wanted to restore the people of the Vale to what they once were. Something that the mayor thinks is impossible, because you see, the thing is, while the people of the Vale did survive after the cataclysm, as they were on the castle when it was moved from the valley to the mountain that it's on right now, well, they didn't really have anywhere else to go, and so the people of the Vale basically just scattered everywhere, with some staying with the castle, while others just went to other parts of the world. As such, Damon made it his mission to go and seek these people out. And again, this is where we get to one of the differences between both versions of the movie. Because in both versions of the film, we do see Damon meet up with the people of the Vale, but the thing is, they've been located in different different places. While like one group of the people of the Vale are in a more Arctic setting, while another is in a desert. But regardless, when Damon goes to both of these groups, they both tell him in different ways that basically what he wants is a pipe dream. And although what I like is that they both do it in different ways. The head of the Arctic group is basically clearly wants to listen to what he has to say, but ultimately believes that it's futile and kindly asks him to leave. While the head of the desert tribe basically tells him to get the fuck out. It's actually a nice little contrast. Regardless, though. No matter which group of people we see him meet with in this flashback, both groups of people there are children in both groups that give Damon a keepsake. For the group of the Arctic people, a boy gives him a little, I guess, bottle containing leaves or whatever, while for the desert people, it's a little girl that gives him a little figurine. As such, Damon basically contemplates everything that's happened, and he does not want to give up on his mom's dream of bringing the veil back. But at this point, he has no idea how he's going to fulfill that dream. And as such, he goes back home, and he and the mayor basically are trying to figure out what to do next. And it's at this point where Damon hears a voice, something calling to him from the Sword of the Veil. And as such, when he and the mayor go to investigate, they actually find the same secret passage that Ash came up through, and they find those underground caverns. And as such, they wound up going through them, but for whatever reason, only Damon was allowed to go forth, while the mayor just kept getting lost. And as such, Damon wound up following the voice further down the cavern, and it's here where he found the source of it. And again, depending on which version of the movie you watch, the voice is either the voice of Reshiram or the voice of Zekrom. But regardless, whichever legendary Pokemon it is, they basically admire what Damon is trying to do, whether it be the strength of his ideals or the strength of the truth he's seeking. And as such, whichever legendary Pokemon he ends up seeking out, well, that Pokemon basically decides, okay, I'm going to help you, as they emerge from their stone form, and they basically volunteer to help him. And from here, Damon ends up taking these legendary Pokemon and goes back to each of the valleys of the people of the Vale, and he basically has Reshiram or Zekrom help them with some kind of local disaster that's happening, and it basically convinces the people of the Vale in both of these areas to come home with them. And it's clear in both versions that he did go to see both sets of people in both sets of films. It's just that which group we see him meeting at which time depends on which version of the movie we're watching. For example, in Pokemon Black, Victini and Reshiram, we see in the prologue for the movie, we see him meeting with the Arctic sect of the group of the people of the Vale, and they end up seeing Zekrom helping them. Whereas in the prologue for Pokemon White, Victini and Zekrom, we see him with Reshiram helping the desert people first, and then after that we see him meeting with the opposite people in the flashback. It's, again, actually some pretty cool stuff. I like those little things here and there. Regardless, him having these legendary Pokemon does end up convincing the people of the Vale in both groups to at least hear him out. As Damon, because as we cut back to the present and Damon is telling his sister and mother about this, and the mayor, representatives of both tribes of the people of the Vale come in, and it's here where Damon reveals what his plan is. As apparently, Reshiram or Zekrom, again, depending on the version, did tell Damon how he could achieve his dream and restore the Kingdom of the Vale, and it basically involves him needing Victini's power. As such, it turns out that whatever he was told, it involves the machine the king used 1,000 years prior, as he basically goes higher up into the castle, and sure enough, the machine is intact. And as such, after he sends a psychic Pokemon up, don't ask me the name, again, I do not know every Pokemon, he ends up having it, he has this thing activate the machine, and he begins kind of messing with the control panel of it. And of course, it's touchless. It's a touchless panel, as he just has to wave his hands around it. But with a combined aspect, but by combining whatever the psychic Pokemon is doing with this terminal, it begins having an effect on the pillars of protection outside, as they actually lift up from wherever they landed and begin closing in on the castle, at which everybody is looking at in awe. The people of the town, the people of the Vale, everyone's looking at this and thinking, wow! Except for Victini, who sees the pillars moving and begins freaking out, because the pillars moving in means that the barrier is shrinking. And as such, Victini begins running, and Ash and Co. immediately see this and start following after. As such, Victini ends up running to the castle, because that's where the pillars seem to be centralized, and as such, Ash and Co. end up following Victini inside the castle. And as such, Victini eventually manages to make his way to the top of the castle, where he ends up seeing Damon. And while for a brief second he mistakes Damon for the king, well, it's Yeah, it's only the only reason for this is because Damon wants to ask Victini to lend him its power. Although it's clear that him asking was just him being polite, because regardless of whether Victini wants to give its power or not, he basically takes it, as miniature versions of the Pillars of Protection immediately surround Victini and basically trap it in a mini barrier. As such, it brings Victini to the top of the structure for the device, and well, it basically basically the machine forces Victini to use its power, as it immediately activates, and basically Victini cries out in pain, and its energy is funneled right into the castle, and sure enough, it does lift the castle right out of the mountain. And once it does, basically Damon is able to use the control panel to begin moving the castle around, and sure enough, underneath the castle is a fresh vein of the Dragon Force, which begins spreading out. As it looks nice and lovely, and wherever it spreads, life seems to bloom, as the Dragon Force goes out to the dead Vale and actually seems to restore it to life. As such, Damon ends up using the control panel to lift the castle even further into the sky, and his plan is basically to move the castle back over to the Vale and thus restore the kingdom to what it was. While everyone outside is all happy and nice about this, well, Victini himself is not so pleased, since it's currently screaming in agony. And as such, Ash and Cohen are meeting back up with Carlita and Juanita, because they ran into the castle because they were chasing after Victini, and they basically want to know what the hell is going on. And as such, all five of them end up running to the top of the castle where Damon is, and sure enough, they see Victini and the thralls of the machine clearly in pain as its power is being pulled from it, is being forcibly taken from it. And while Damon tries excusing himself by saying, "I'm borrowing this power," this is not borrowing, you asshat. And everyone points that out to him as they say that Victini's clearly in pain. He needs to stop this now. But Damon basically does not want to hear this, as he thinks he's so close to helping achieve his mom's dream. He just needs a little bit more. But even his mom tells him that this isn't worth it, which actually shocks Damon, but clearly not enough to stop this. Either way, Ash decides to step in as he orders Pikachu to try and break the mini pillars, and it's here where Damon ends up calling out one of his Pokemon to help him. And again, depending on the version, depends on the Pokemon. And again, I'm going to check my notes for this one because I forgot the name of one Pokemon, so excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that, but yeah, depending on the movie, depends on which Pokemon that Damon seems to have. As in one version, he has a Gothitelle, and in another, it's a Reuniclus. Regardless, he ends up sticking this Pokemon in the group, and it's able to hold the group back. And whichever Pokemon it is does hold the group back with its psychic powers, but all it takes is a shock from Pikachu to knock it aside. However, once the Pikachu tries to go and destroy the pillars, who should show up but either Reshiram or Zekrom, again depending on the movie, who basically, without saying any words, makes it abundantly clear that it's going to help Damon regardless of what anyone wants to happen. And as such, while Damon's mom ends up pulling out one of her own Pokemon, I think it's called a Golleek, a Golleek, to try and fight the legendary dragon Pokemon, again, whichever one depends on the version. Again, it's a legendary Pokemon against maybe a strong Pokemon, but still a regular Pokemon, and as a result, Golleek ends up getting thrown out of the castle to the ground below. Don't worry, he's fine. He comes back later. But regardless, this leaves the group basically off guard long enough for Damon to call out his psychic Pokemon again, which immediately traps the group, and then it manages to knock them out. Damon doesn't kill them because, again, his goal isn't to kill these people, as he wants to reunite the kingdom. But while Ash is unconscious, he has another dream given to him by Victini. And in the dream, we hear what the king's last words to Victini were before he croaked. It turns out that the reason why the castle was placed where it wasn't just because of decor or whatever. It's because that it needed to be here. At this, like I said, the Dragon Force was going nuts, and him putting the castle in its place did settle the Dragon Force. But the thing is, once the castle was put in place, it could not be moved, as moving it even 1 inch would disturb the Dragon Force and basically just kickstart its corruption all over again and basically destroy the world. So as a result, the king's last words to Victini were, "Don't move the castle or everyone will die." And sure enough, as Ash has this dream, back on the ground, the Dragon Force begins getting corrupted, and everything that's nearby it begins dying. So, thanks a lot, jackass! Either way, Ash ends up waking up in the storeroom of the castle, and he ends up telling the group exactly what he dreamed about, which shocks everyone as they realize that Damon's quest to try and restore the Kingdom of the Veil is going to get everybody killed. However, they can't do anything to stop Damon right now, as regardless of whether his mission is right or wrong, he thinks that he wants to restore the kingdom, and he has one of the legendary dragon Pokemon on his side. So fighting him is not going to be an easy task. So how can they beat him? The answer? The other legendary dragon Pokemon. Like I said, Damon has access to Reshiram or Zekrom, but that still leaves one other legendary Pokemon sleeping. And so basically, Juanita suggested that they can get the help of that other Pokemon, then they can at least have a fighting chance against Damon. As such, the group realizes that means they need to get down into the caverns below the castle, since that's where Damon said he found his legendary Pokemon. And since Ash already used that secret passageway at the beginning of the movies, he's able to go right back in. And like Damon before him, he's the only one that's allowed to go down. As for whatever reason, legendary Pokemon seem to respond to him. As such, he and Pikachu have to leave the rest of the group behind as they make their way further down in the caverns, and sure enough, whichever legendary Pokemon was not woken to Damon does sense Ash's presence and begins kind of testing him as he goes further down. As they send up an energy that causes each of the platforms to dissolve, but Ash and Pikachu are able to dodge enough and get their footing until they eventually come tumbling down to the bottom of the cavern, where they find either Reshiram or Zekrom waiting for them. And while they don't emerge from their stone form right away, they do ask Ash what he wishes for. And yes, Reshiram and Zekrom can talk. They both have telepathy. And as such, Ash tells them that his wish is to help Victini, that all Victini wants is to see the ocean, and Ash wants to help Victini achieve that dream. And sure enough, again, depending on the version, this either gets Reshiram or Zekrom to meet the side with Ash, as they believe either the strength of his ideal or the strength of his truth is enough for them to warrant enough for them to warrant their help. And so they emerge from their stone state and pretty much promise Ash, "I'll help you, kid." As such, from there, Golik ends up coming back up onto the scene as the rest of the group is outside in the castle. Once again, Juanita orders Golik to try and stop Damon, but this in turn causes Golik to clash with whatever dragon Pokemon is working with Damon. Thankfully, though, even while Golik gets his ass handed to him, helper has the form of Ash in whichever legendary Pokemon is on his side. As both legendary Pokemon end up clashing, and Ash is dropped out at the top of the castle so he can free Victini, whereas both Reshiram and Zekrom begin fighting in the skies trying to stop each other. As such, once again, Ash clashes with Damon as he once more tries sending out his psychic Pokemon to get in Ash's way, but this time Ash actually has a better fighting chance as he and Pikachu are prepared to fight this thing, and Pikachu does manage to stun whichever psychic Pokemon that Damon had. In the meantime, Reshiram and Zekrom keep fighting, but their battle eventually gets so heated that, again, depending on the movie, one of them gets knocked down to the ground below, ultimately the one that was siding with Damon. And as they fall to the ground below, they end up coming into contact with the corrupted Dragon Force. And it's only thanks to the intervention of the Dragon Pokemon that sided with Ash that they're not pulled into it. But regardless, yeah, the legendary dragons see that what Damon is doing is literally fucking over the earth, and they realize, maybe I bet on the wrong horse here. And as such, both Reshiram and Zekrom end up siding with Ash, as they both end up going back up to the castle. And while Ash wants to try and free Victini, unfortunately, Pikachu's powers enough to destroy the mini pillars. Thankfully, with the intervention of either Reshiram or Zekrom, again, whichever one had sided with Damon, they managed to break through the pillars, and basically everyone turns on Damon, much to his own shock. And when he asks whichever legendary Pokemon sided with him why they're doing this, they basically tell them, "The Earth is hurting, and I felt its pain." Which confuses Damon, but everyone soon tells Damon the Dragon Force is corrupted and it's killing everything. And so Damon is shocked to hear this, but he basically goes back to the control panel and lowers the castle down. And sure enough, once he sees the Earth is being destroyed because of the Dragon Force, he's like, "Oh fuck, I messed up here." As such, it becomes a matter of how they're going to stop this, as that if the Dragon Force is allowed to continue, there's no one's going to survive. Thankfully, though, Reshiram and Zekrom do have a solution, as they tell Damon that if they want to fix this, then he needs to use the power of the sword. And as such, the plan basically is to just do what the king did 1,000 years prior. Lower the sword to whatever large fissure of the Dragon Force they can find, and then get it in place. And sure enough, that should be able to calm the Dragon Force and stop it from destroying everything. However, this is easier said than done, as while Damon tries to get the aid of the legendary dragons, the Dragon Force seems to actually get funneled up into the sword and starts causing the castle to start crumbling. As such, Damon tells everyone they need to cut and run, and while they do their best, Ash does not go far, as he's currently holding on to Victini, and he doesn't want to abandon it. And unfortunately, things are going from bad to worse, as while the group is able to get away, because the mayor had come up on a biplane he had, I guess, and while most of the group are able to hitch a ride with him, with Iris, of course, going on the dragon with Carlita because of her dragon Pokemon. That's not legendary, but again, I don't remember the name. Unfortunately, though, because of the Dragon Force energy being funneled into the sword, well, it turns out the pillars of protection are beginning to close in even further onto the top of the castle. And as such, while Ash eventually does try to make a run for it, because Victini is in his arms, he can't go anywhere. And since he's not planning to abandon Victini here, he's basically stuck. And to make matters worse, well, the castle begins shifting because of all the Dragon Force energy that's being funneled into it, and it basically almost destabilizes as it ends up kind of going on its side. And while Damon is able to stop Ash from falling out of it, he ends up falling out himself. Don't worry, he gets saved by Golic. But the ensuing energy ends up blasting the sword of the Veil right into the sky and into space. Yeah, that's a mite dangerous, don't you think? And sure enough, well, space is space, and so Ash and Co. begin freezing over, as Ash is just holding on to Pikachu and Victini, trying to keep them both warm, but even he realizes that if this keeps going, they're all fucked. They're either going to freeze to death or die of oxygen deprivation. There is no coming back from this. Ultimately, thanks to the intervention of Damon on Golic, plus Victini and plus Reshiram and Zekrom, they start attacking the pillars of protection to try and stop them, but ultimately their attacks don't seem to do anything. As while the pillars do seem to be reacting to their attacks, well, those reactions are minimal at best. As while they seem to briefly flash out of power, that power is quickly restored and the barrier is still in place. And as such, while this does allow Ash enough of a chance to get himself, Victini, and Pikachu out onto a ledge, well, again, there's really nowhere else to go, and when Pikachu tries offering aid by shooting an electric attack right at the pillars, this seems to just make things even worse. The pillars actually zero in on Ash, Pikachu, and Victini and just bottle them in. And it's clear they can't go anywhere. And while Damon tries reaching through and tries encouraging Ash to keep going because he was chosen by the legendary dragons, well, he's in space! Unfortunately, he can't keep fighting as while he tries to stand tall and stand strong, he collapses. He can't go any further, and his last words before he passes out are that he's sorry to Victini for not being able to help it see the ocean. And Victini sees this, and before Ash passes out, a tear rolls down his eyes, which freezes before it even hits the floor. As such, Victini is not having any of this shit, as it does not want its friend to die, and so Victini begins flaring with energy, which does warm the area enough to thaw Ash out and get him to wake up, and it's here where Victini finally decides to take its anger out on the pillars, as it unleashes one attack on the pillars, which seems to have an effect on it, before unleashing everything it has in one final charge right at the pillars, and sure enough, this manages to finally destabilize them and cause them to go flying, causing all of them to be depowered and for the barrier to finally disappear. Unfortunately, though, this seems to cause Victini to go along with it, as it's nowhere to be seen afterwards, which much to Ash's dismay. But its sacrifice is not in vain, as the Dragon Force energy is expelled right into space, and the castle is now stabilized. As such, from here, Damon is able to take control of the castle while Ash passes out again, and thanks to the help of Reshiram, Zekrom, and I guess even Golic, they are able to start, and as well as a bevy of psychic Pokemon, as part of the reason why Victini was there was to kind of give an extra boost of power to the psychic Pokemon that were to help lift the castle. They are able to finally move the castle back down to Earth's atmosphere, and Ash does eventually awaken as Damon got him a blanket and set him down somewhere. And sure enough, Damon is able to move the castle to a new area, as as he does manage to find a new fissure for where the Dragon Force energy is, and he's able to finally place the castle back into place, and sure enough, it going back into the ground is able to stabilize the Dragon Force and stop it from killing everything. Although, while everyone's happy that this is the case, Ash is sorrowful that Victini isn't here right now, especially because the castle has now been set down by the beach, which means that now everyone can see the ocean. As such, Ash ends up meeting back up with his friends Ash managed to meet back up with his friends who got out of the castle as he goes down to the beach, and he's basically just sad that Victini isn't here. And as a kind of a final call out to Victini, he takes out a macaron and throws into the air, saying that he knows how Victini loved macarons, and something in the air grabs it and begins eating it. Yeah, Victini survived, and how Ash is able to get Victini to go visible again is that he pulls out another macaron and says, well, I guess I'm going to be eating these all, and this causes Victini to run up to go visible and try and grab it. Like, no, I want one! It's adorable. But yeah, Ash is happy to see Victini again. He even pulls Victini into a hug, which it's not fully okay with, but it's at least happy that Ash is happy. And as such, everyone is just overjoyed to see Victini again. But Victini shares another vision with Ash, which basically makes it clear that Victini doesn't plan to stick around. As it's free now, the barrier's gone, it wants to explore. And the place it wants to explore most is the Veil, as the Dragon Force, the release of the Dragon Force did something right, as the Veil was restored a bit, and so Victini wants to go back to the Veil and protect it, nourish it, make it whole again. And Ash and Co. understand this. And basically, they kind of just give their farewells to Victini. Well, sort of. The end credits do showcase that Victini does still hang around with the group for a little bit, but everyone understands what Victini wants to do, and everyone's in support of it. As such, Silent ends up giving Victini more macarons. Everyone says their farewells. And as for Damon, well, he kind of has a breakdown because his plan to, restore the kingdom almost ended with everyone dying. And so his mom is able to basically get him to buck up by telling him that they need to look towards the future instead of looking towards the past. And thus, the film ends as the people of the Veil basically have one more reunion to share stories around a campfire. Victini plays to the kids, and eventually Ash and Co. go on their way as they leave the town behind and go off for new adventures. Also, yes, Team Rocket was here in these movies as well. They were in town because of the competition. They planned to steal all the Pokemon. Wound up hearing talk about Victini from Juanita. Decided they wanted to kidnap Victini, and in the process of trying to get to Victini, they were on the castle when it was lifted up into the sky, and they were just there in the background throughout the entire movie until the castle was put back into place. So essentially, they were pointless. But yeah, that was Pokemon Black, Victini and Reshiram, and Pokemon White, Victini and Zekrom. And what are my thoughts on these movies? Ultimately, I think they're both pretty damn good. Now, I'm just gonna say right now off the gate, I do not think that your experience will be lessened or improved depending on which version of the movie you see. Because quite frankly, I think this is really just a matter of pick your preference. Because when it comes down to it, like I said, these movies are both just the same movie. And aside from maybe a few scenes here and there, and the fact that certain Pokemon are used for certain scenes, or which Pokemon ends up siding with Ash or Damon in the film, neither of these films is any different from the other. And in my personal opinion, and ultimately what I believe is that whichever film you prefer watching just is really a matter of your preference. Do you want to see Ash work with Reshiram, or do you want to see Ash work with Zekrom? Do you want to see Reshiram working with a bad guy, or do you want to see Zekrom working with a bad guy? That's all up to you. And it really just is really just a matter of what you would prefer to see in your movie. Because at the end of the day, both of these films are not lessened or improved by these changes. They're just changes, purely cosmetic in my opinion. In fact, I'm going to give both of these movies a slight nick for that, because, well, by virtue of the fact that there's virtually no difference between these films regardless of which one you see, Reshiram and Zekrom are very much interchangeable, and I get that's why, and I understand why. That was by design, because like I said, the film as a whole is the same story, and regardless of which version of the movie you watch, things play out exactly the same no matter what happens. And so it makes sense why certain Pokemon would be as interchangeable as they are, hence why Reshiram and Zekrom are as interchangeable as they are in this movie, despite the fact that one represents ideals and the other represents truth. Although I have absolutely no idea how the hell you can represent ideals. What does that even mean? I don't get it. But again, regardless, when it comes down to it, both of them are very interchangeable, and while I do get a sense of their personalities based on how they talk, that doesn't really play a factor into the plot. We're given a sense that Zekrom is more forceful when it comes to him enforcing ideals. Hell, how he got Damon. Hell, when he first spoke to Damon in Pokemon Black, Victini and Reshiram, was when he said, "If that's the strength of your ideals, you should give them up now." And he basically he operated under the pretense of tough love, while Reshiram was more kind and gentle, and basically liked to lightly push someone towards what they wanted. But again, neither of those forces really play into either movie, because ultimately Damon seeks out either of these legendary Pokemon regardless of how they talk to him, and they behave the same way regardless of which version of the movie you watch. If you watch Pokemon Black, Zekrom is the one helping Damon. If you watch Pokemon White, it's Reshiram. And regardless of which version of the film you watch, Reshiram and Zekrom do end up working together in the end to put everything back. Oh yeah, that's another thing that happened. After everything was said and done, Reshiram and Zekrom basically just flew off to travel the world, which I don't blame them. They've been cooped up in balls for the last 1,000 years. I think you want to let them stretch their legs. But again, regardless of which version of the movie you watch, they're interchangeable. And again, I understand why they did this, but I find that to be a problem, especially since they gave both Reshiram and Zekrom voices. So you think that would mean that they would have some form of character, but no. Ultimately, regardless of their difference in demeanors, you can easily replace one with the other. And they do. Both, like I said, both movies have both characters play the same roles. Again, they swap roles depending on which version you watch, but at the end of the day, Reshiram and Zekrom either work for Ash or Damon, and it's up to you whichever one you want to see first. Do you want to see Zekrom working with Damon? Then watch Pokemon Black. You want to see Reshiram working with Damon? Watch Pokemon White. Again, it all depends on which one you want to see. And again, I find that interesting because it can change up the viewing experience a little bit, but not really enough to warrant seeing the movie twice in a row. Again, I would argue, this is where I go back to you'd have to pick your preference. Because while I do find this to be a flaw, it also means that you can watch either version of the movie, and I think you get exactly what you want out of it. Again, I guess that another difference that I do sort of like is when we see Damon interacting with the tribes of the people of the Vale, because like I said, the demeanors of the leaders of both tribes are very different. As the woman that's in charge of the group of people of the Vale that's located in the Arctic is more kind and gentle, but also does not believe in his mission. Whereas the leader of the people of the Vale that were in the desert basically is a complete jackass. I'm not even kidding. He does not even try and offer even an iota of entertainment to what Damon is offering. As while Damon's intentions are pure, he basically thinks that he's living a fairy tale and tells him as much. I'm not even joking. Damon, going back to the flashback scenes, in Pokemon White, when Damon goes to meet with the people in the Arctic, they do tell him to leave, but they do it politely, just saying, "I think you need to go." Like, it's clear they want to listen to what he has to say, but they have to but they have to be realistic, so they don't even entertain them. Whereas the people who live in the desert, again, He basically just throws everything back in Damon's face and tells him to GTFO. And the only reason he's shown any kindness is because the rest of the people of this place aren't assholes. So again, I find that interesting. And as such, the prologues of both of those movies, I do find to be a little nice. I find to be a little nicer when you have the contrast of the other movie to work off of them. Because I watched these films, Pokemon Black first and Pokemon White after that. And so for the Black version, they had him meet with the people in the Arctic, and again, we saw him talking with them again, since the prologues of these films are the second meetings with both of these groups, and thus again, once again, they're forceful but polite. Whereas with the desert, while he does come in offering kindness, as the little girl who's the daughter of the chieftain had a Pokemon who was injured that Damon helped, he says, "I'm thankful for your help, but my answer is still the same. Get out." It's clearly forceful, but not polite at all. He's basically just like, "I don't have time for dreamers around here. I've got people who need my help." So I do appreciate that, at least. But again, aside from those scenes, Nothing changes. Both of these films are pretty much the same film, and whichever one you want to watch really does depend on what your personal preferences are. And in some ways that is a flaw, because ultimately I think it makes watching both films back-to-back rather superfluous, as again, it's only really a matter of aesthetics for these films. Well, again, which would you prefer to see happen? Do you want to see Ash and Co. working with Reshiram, or do you want to see them working with Zekrom? It's all up to you, but your choices do not matter in that regard. So again, it can be a positive if you want to see things changed up a little, but also a negative if you want a new viewing experience, which sadly I do not think you will get if you decide to watch both these films back to back. With that said, taken on their own as just a movie, I don't think these films are bad. I dare say I think they're actually pretty damn good. I will knock the films in plot-wise for one major thing. I don't like Damon. Now, I'm not going to claim that Damon is an awful character, but I hate him just for how he treats Victini. Yeah, much like with my unwarranted hate of Xylan because he keeps using cooking puns whenever he talks, Damon immediately got on my shit list for how he treated Victini. Because for the most part of the film, he can be a rather reasonable guy, and his end goals in the film are not awful. All he wants is to restore the kingdom of his people, and as such, he wants to unite them under one banner. And he does genuinely believe in improving and restoring that which was once lost. And in that regard, yes, I like that. And when he is shown the error of his ways, he at least does try to make up for it as best as he can and fix the mistakes that he made. The only problem is that when he tries achieving his goals, it's clear he does not give a shit about the people who are caught in the crossfire, and that's exactly why I don't like him. I understand that we're trying to make him a more complex character, and you know what? I'm going to applaud these movies for that, because I do like seeing more complexity in the characters. Yeah, sometimes it's fun to have a cartoonishly evil villain, but sometimes it is nice to have a villain that has more to them beyond the stereotypical, grrr, I'm the evil one for this movie. So I would applaud them for trying that with Damon. The only problem is, by trying to show that he has layers, I think they failed because his treatment of Victini is bullshit. There is no way in hell I want to side with this guy after what he does to Victini. Because, like I said, he doesn't ask Victini for its power, he fucking takes it. Actually, I take that back. He asks to be polite, but he doesn't even wait for Victini to acknowledge the answer before he locks the thing in a little barrier and then starts siphoning its power out forcefully. Yes! This guy is a morally complex character. Look at him torturing that little animal over there. And yes, the animal abuse is kind of a big thing, because while Victini does have a rather tragic character arc, that's still an animal there. Pokemon are animals. You gotta remember that. And so here's our complex, morally ambiguous villain, everyone, as he tortures an animal and then basically tells everyone who tells him to knock it off to shut the hell up. Yeah, this is a guy I give a shit about. This is a guy that I feel is so emotionally complex. Go to hell. Fuck you, Damon. Yeah, I'm not gonna go. Yeah, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about his heel face turn. And the only reason he has the heel face turn is because his actions have the consequence of nearly destroying the world. And I know what some of you are probably gonna say. Well, that must mean he cares about the world. Well, to quote the Kingpin from Spider-Man, there is no profit to be made in the destruction of the world. It's really bad for business. Translation, I don't give a shit if him seeing the world made him do a heel face turn, because even the most barest of villains would probably think, hey, maybe destroying the world, the place where all of our cool shit is a bad idea, is all I'm saying. So I don't care if he has a heel face turn when he sees that his actions are destroying the world. I think he's an asshole. He was willing to use Victini as a living battery, regardless of its own volition or autonomy. It siphoned the power out of it. It was clearly in pain, and when everyone told him to knock it off, he just pretty much said, basically in the pursuit of truth or ideals, again depending on the version, and sometimes sacrifices need to be made. To which I respond with, fuck you, dude. Just fuck you. If the destruction of the world is what it takes for you to get off that high horse of yours, then you can go to hell, my friend. I don't care I don't care what his end goal was. I don't care if he was trying to restore a kingdom because of a dream that his mother had, that his mother imparted onto him. He tortured a small animal just to achieve his end goal, and when people called him out on it, he doubled down. Screw him. Fuck you, Damon. That is my thoughts. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. You are free to disagree with me. It's just that this is one barrier that I do not think should be crossed. And he crossed it, and now he can pretty much die in a pit for all I care. So, screw you, Damon. With that said, one of the major things that does keep me enjoying this movie is also, well, Victini. While Victini doesn't get a voice like Reshiram or Zekrom, you can very much see what Victini's character is through his personality, how he interacts with people, his body language, and yes, even through his dreams. You really get a sense of who Victini is as a character. And like with your standard cutesy-wootsy Pokemon that we've seen in other films, it's adorable to watch. And yes, I do want a Victini plush. Why are you asking? So it's nice seeing it interact with people. But we do see that Victini is a bit more shy than other Pokemon. And it's not like with Celebi that seems a bit distrustful. No, Victini, while clearly wanting to interact with people, always tries to stay in the background. It's why it was usually invisible whenever it was doing anything out in town. Or likewise, when it did take a liking to Ash, it didn't directly talk to him until Ash actually acknowledged Victini's presence. And even then, it still tried to remain invisible, as the only way it made itself visible was when Ash offered it macarons, and even that didn't fully win Victini over, as when Ash tried getting all close and personal and cuddly with it, it basically got sensory overload and basically wanted Ash to back off. But again, what we do see of Victini is that despite its social awkwardness, it is a friendly little Pokemon, which in turn makes when it actually feels distressed that much more, well, distressing. As what I like is that during the middle of the playtime that Ash and Co have with Victini, the first time we see it react negatively, and I mean truly negatively, was when it saw the Pillars of Protection. And when we saw it slam up against the barrier from the inside and then react negatively as it launched an attack at the barrier, it helps really get a sense that how much Victini loathes this thing. And it makes sense. When you learn Victini's history, it really does make you feel sorry for this little guy, as he's been trapped in one singular location for 1,000 years. And through Victini's dream, we really get a sense of how much that loneliness has weighed down on Victini for so long. To be trapped in one location, watch the days and nights just speed by until it all becomes a blur. Seeing civilization grow around you, but being unable to participate in it. To just watch people come and go from your life without having to feel any attachment. That's probably one of the reasons why Victini is so shy, because it probably is afraid to form emotional attachment with people because they won't stick around for it. It's sad. And again, Victini was there when its former master died. When the king died, Victini was the last one that he saw. And again, it's tragic, because Victini clearly loved the king like a pet would love its owner. Like Pikachu loves Ash, like Piplup loved Dawn, like Iris does with her Pokemon. Excuse me 1 second, I want to look it up. Her Pokemon was Axew. Sorry, that was bugging me too. Again, this is the era of Pokemon where I don't know all the names, so apologies, so I have to look it up every now and then. But yeah, like I said, Victini saw the king die in front of its face, and again, imagine how much that would hurt. Imagine how much mental scarring that would do to Victini. And we see that when the king dies, Victini does not register it right away, because a second ago, its best friend was reaching up to it to hold its face, and then he just went limp. And what I love is that Victini tries to get a reaction out of him, like, "Hey, I'm here, it's okay, why aren't you moving?" And then likewise, when you see Victini's dreams, as we see the ghost of the king apologizing to Victini for trapping it like this before fading away entirely, you can feel Victini's pain, knowing that the one person that it cared about is gone. And it's sad. it's just genuinely sad, and it makes you feel so sorry for this thing, and thus makes you root for it more and sympathize with its desire to be free, because it wants to go out there in the world. It clearly wants to form new connections, but it's limited, it's trapped. And while it clearly tries making the best of a bad situation, as Victini is able to make friends with a lot of people in Pokemon, well, at the end of the day, it still feels lonely. It just wants freedom again. It wants to do these things that it had missed out on for so long. It's why its end goal is to want to see the ocean, because it hasn't seen it for 1,000 years. It only sees the ocean from a distance. It would love to see it up close. And you sympathize with that, which in turn makes you feel even more sorry for Victini when bad things begin happening to it. When Damon uses it as nothing more than a power source for the machine to empower all the psychic Pokemon and lift up the sword of the veil. You really feel sorry for Victini, which in turn makes you hate Damon just a little bit more. And then by the end of the movie, when Victini is willing to sacrifice itself for the sake of Ash and its freedom, it's sad. It's triumphant. It's tragic but triumphant, which makes you even more happy to see Victini by the end, because not only did its sacrifice not end with, well, its death, but now it's finally free, and you feel even happier for it, because now it can finally have the chance to move on and grow, which is probably another reason why it keeps having nightmares every so often, because hell, being trapped in the place where you saw your master die would probably mess you up a little bit. Just saying. And as such, I like Victini's character arc through the movie. Yeah, you don't get to know Victini personally, as like I said, it doesn't have telepathy and can't talk, but you don't need to have that voice. You know what Victini is thinking just by its actions throughout the movie, and quite frankly, I feel that that's the strongest emotional core in the film. Wanting to see Victini get out okay, wanting to see Ash help Victini reach its goals, and by the end, when Victini does get free and is able to go where it wants, you feel so happy for it. And I like that. It's really nice and sweet, and really does pack, and ultimately makes everything feel a lot more tense when Victini is quite literally packed in, when the pillars of protection keep closing in on it. I love that. It's great stuff, and it really helps make everything come together and creates a great sense of tension when you want to see Victini saved whenever it's put in danger. And of course, this is also a Pokemon movie, and I'm just going to be honest right now. The other major factor that keeps me enjoying these movies is the action. I'm just going to say right now, I think these movies have the best action scenes out of all the Pokemon movies I've seen thus far. I am not joking. Regardless of the movie, when Ash befriended Reshiram or Zekrom, and they arrived on the scene to fight whichever legendary Pokemon was siding with Damon, my face lit up like a Christmas tree. And seeing these two legendary dragons duking it out in the sky, it was fun. It was just a joy. I felt my inner little boy squeeing like a fangirl. It was just so damn awesome, man! I thought it was great seeing Reshiram and Zekrom just fighting and duking it out in the sky, seeing these tremendous battles going on. It was a joy to behold. I could not stop watching it. I couldn't get away from it. I loved it. It was great, and that's another reason I like these movies. The action, kick-ass, then honestly some of the best. Of course, you still got some pretty cool visuals. When the Dragon Force is unleashed, it actually looks nice, especially when it goes haywire. I think the sword of the Veil is really cool. Again, ultimately, there are plenty of the other side characters are nice. I do like Carlita and Juanita as they try to basically be the forces that even out Damon, even if he doesn't listen to them. So they're likable in their own regard, especially since Carlita is the one that points Ash and Co towards Victini, which again, I like that her tone when she realizes they didn't even know about Victini immediately turns softer, so I like that. But again, ultimately, I do think these films are pretty damn good. Again, if I have to list flaws with them, is that ultimately, whichever version of the film you want to watch, it's just really up to personal preference. I don't think your experience would be changed that much from watching one film over another, just merely a matter of aesthetics. It's again, merely just comes down to whichever one you prefer. Do you want to see Ash working with Reshiram, or you want him working with Zekrom? It's your choice, and it's up to you. And while I think that is pretty cool, it is kind of lessen things a little when you have such integral characters like these two legendary Pokemon become so interchangeable. little. Ultimately, though, I do think this is a good film. While Damon pisses me off to a degree that I find maybe a bit unhealthy, Victini's story I think is really nice and is the glue that holds the film together. And it's that emotional tension and drama it keeps me interested and makes me want to see where things go in the end. It's got great action. It's got some great characters, some great emotional bits that do make me tear up. And ultimately, again, regardless of which version of the film you watch, I think you will have a good time. There's plenty to like in here, and while there are some factors here and there that I do think hold these films back a little, I do think that they're still good enough to give a thumbs up to. So if you're interested in them, I recommend giving them a watch. Whichever one you decide to watch, I think you'll have a good time regardless. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. I thank you for watching. As always, I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week as we go back to just looking at one Pokemon movie as we see what's basically the equivalent of a team of Pokemon superheroes, I guess, as we take a look at Kyurem versus the Sword of Justice. I apologize if I mispronounced that name.